Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the National Future Transport Summit Sustainability Consultation Workshop. We'll get started on time today. My name is Brooke Hall, and I'm the Executive Director of the Centre for Connected and Automated Transport. I'm joined here with my colleague, Beck Kennedy, today, who will be assisting on the presentation and with the online polling. We've got an exciting agenda today with some expert presentations from Susan Harris from ITS Australia, Adele Lausberg from the Heavy Vehicle Industry Association, and also Ben Haddock from ARIP. I'll be introducing each of those expert presenters a little bit later on. But I just wanted to provide a welcome to everybody and note that this is the fourth out of 5 consultation webinars as part of this series. We have one more webinar on social legitimacy next week for those who are interested in joining that as well. For those who are interested in recapping on the previous consultation webinars, we'll be publishing some summaries of those webinar presentations, as well as the recordings of them on the National Future Transport Summit website. So for today's agenda, I just want to first of all highlight that we will be using Menti to do some online live polling. So if you have the opportunity using a second screen or alternatively using your phone, please go to menti.com and enter the code that you see on the screen there. And we'll get started with just a really brief question just to test the Menti capability, make sure everybody's logged in and familiar with the software plugin. Whilst you're accessing that, I'll provide a brief overview of the day that we have, the session that we have planned. You're able to go back one slide. Thanks, Beck. I'll provide an overview of the National Future Transport Summit. Part of this I'll be doing by showing a short video that goes for about 90 seconds. Then providing a bit of an overview on the sustainability theme. What are the challenges in particular to sustainability? We'll then have our expert addresses. Each will be providing an overview of the sustainability challenge in relation to the deployment and scaling of connected and automated transport in Australia, and how that technology can be utilised to deliver us with greater sustainability outcomes. I'll provide some information along the way around how else you can be involved in the consultation process, and then we'll have a facilitated Q&A discussion where you'll be able to pose questions to the experts here. So to do that, feel free to add your questions to type them into the Q&A function of the webinar, and then we'll be able to pick them up at the appropriate time. Next slide, please. Okay, excellent. So some of you have already started responding to the Menti question to describe the community or industry that you represent. So we've got a mix of infrastructure, sustainability, research, heavy vehicles, academia, automotive. Wonderful. That's great to see that diversity there. And that's exactly what makes up the National Future Transport Summit Consortium, is the diversity of the membership across government, industry, and the research sectors. Okay, so now that we've got that, we'll move on to the video.
Automated transport will transform Australia and the way we live.
Connected and automated technologies can provide huge benefits to Australia and New Zealand across safety, productivity, accessibility, mobility, and decarbonisation. But we can't just assume these benefits. We need to plan for them and make sure that our infrastructure and our systems and frameworks support that technology to provide those benefits.
The National Future Transport Summit is the first of its kind. The summit is more than just a conference. It's a platform for agreement and action. It's an opportunity to bring together the most influential organisations and the brightest minds in Australia to pave the way for the future of transport. With over 60 organisations already involved in the preparations for the summit, this event will be like no other. We've listened to industry and government and identified 5 areas of action: safety, productivity, sustainability, infrastructure, and community acceptance. The National Future Transport Summit will address all of these issues through consultation, deliberation, and by agreement on a set of recommendations. These 5 themes will ensure that the recommendations of the summit meet Australia's future and maximise the benefits for the Australian public. So come along and join us in September for the National Transport Future Summit. We look forward to having you there and being part of Australia's future. Okay, so the key objective of the National Future Transport Summit is to bring government and industry leaders together to agree on those recommendations for the planning for connected and automated transport. The purpose of this is that we collectively can agree to an enduring point of reference that informs government and industry decisions moving forwards. As I'll outline a little bit later, we're right at the pointy part of the summit initiative now, which is developing those recommendations. So for those who are already engaged, you'll be aware of what we're aiming to do and where we're at in the process. But for those who are new to the summit initiative, now's a really fantastic time to be involved, as it's a really critical time in the lead up to the National Future Transport Summit event. Next slide, please. So with our consortium of government and industry and academic partners, we've collectively identified 8 national imperatives for action. Each of these is big enough in its own right to justify government action, but collectively it creates a massive groundswell of why we should be actively championing the future transport system that relies on the technologies of connected and automated transport. So most critical to today's is around addressing the climate crisis. Transport must decarbonise, and there are many active solutions in terms of transport decarbonisation, but one that is sometimes a little bit overlooked is the benefits that can be achieved through greater connectivity and automation, which improves the efficiency of networks, the efficiency of vehicles. So even when there's it's difficult to electrify or go to zero emissions fuel options, connectivity and automation provides a very valuable pathway to assist that decarbonisation effort. Another thing that's really critical in terms of the sustainability agenda is that population growth and the demand for transport services is growing incredibly quickly. It's growing faster than what our infrastructure is able to cope with, but that's also putting a lot of pressure in terms of energy and fuel consumption. So these are some of the things that we need to deal with. Traditionally, decarbonisation is one of those externalities which we hope that government will be able to assist in the process, but public funds are limited. So public funding to subsidise green technologies is often not there. So we need to find a way that's compelling and commercially viable without relying on public funds. Next slide, please. The consortium group has worked together to identify a number of challenges that we face in terms of achieving those outcomes around safety, productivity, and sustainability. and also encouraging those enablers around social legitimacy or community acceptance and the infrastructure needed to support the future transport system. There's a number of overarching challenges as well about a national vision, whether we have that clear national vision to drive us in the right direction. The technology and business models, are they mature enough, and do we have certainty around how those business models are going to develop and be deployed at scale? The skills, do we have the right skills in Australia to facilitate connected and automated transport future? This is more than just the initial deployment, but it's about maintaining a future fleet of vehicles that is very different from what we've been accustomed to for the last 100 years. The public understanding, how well do people understand and accept the technology, but also how well they can understand the use of connected and automated transport, so it is applied in a safe manner. And then there's the resources about the capacity of our decision makers and transport managers, but also about the funding resources needed to facilitate this future. These are overarching challenges that touch on each of the 5 themes of the National Future Transport Summit. So I mentioned before that the summit has a consortium. This now has grown to over 100 organisations from across government and industry and academia, including national representative industry bodies that also have representation and influence amongst their own member organisations. So from government, we have some of the key state road agencies or transport agencies, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, the National Transport Commission. So really key bodies in terms of driving the connected and automated future. We're also supported by the consulting sector, as well as providers of the technologies and the solutions themselves. Next slide, please. The summit has been an iterative development process. We've been on this journey for around 18 months, and we began with an idea of what needed to happen, and we've worked to build up a steering committee, which has now formed into that consortium group, building that government and industry support for the initiative, establishing an editorial committee that could advise on and help develop a National Future Transport Summit discussion paper, which was published at the end of April, just recently. And now we're in that consultation period where we invite submissions and also participation in these consultation workshops. Public consultation on the challenges is what helps form the recommendations that will be presented at the National Future Transport Summit event on the 17th to 18th of September. Next slide. So today's theme is sustainability. It's one of the 5 themes of the summit. I'll briefly touch on the sustainability vision. Next slide, please. And this is for highly efficient vehicles and networks that maximise sustainable traffic flow, minimises congestion and cuts emissions. So through our consortium, we've also worked on a key policy principle around this, and that's about ensuring sustainability and net zero planning in the public and private sector recognises the interconnection between connected and automated transport and sustainability, and also the benefits of the technology for reducing emissions and improving health and well-being. So it's not just about decarbonisation, but it's about providing a cleaner air in our urban areas. So that's a little bit of an introduction and overview of the National Future Transport Summit and today's theme. To give it a bit more depth, I'm pleased to introduce Susan Harris, the Chief Executive of ITS Australia. Susan's ideally placed at the nexus of technology and transport to translate the benefits to business and the Australian community, supporting strong connections to the international ITS community and global network of ITS associations. Susan's highly regarded for her role supporting the growth and innovation of our industry across a number of industry advisory groups and as a regular advisor to government and ministers on transport technology and mobility related issues. Susan's a strong advocate for next generation transport professionals and the importance of diversity in our sector to deliver the best outcomes. So I'm greatly pleased to welcome Susan Harris to present to this consultation workshop. Over to you. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us, everyone. We know that transport represents some 20% of the emissions in Australia at the moment, and this percentage is growing as the freight task and the traffic task grows each year, and other sectors get more efficient, but the freight and the transport sector aren't yet getting those same efficiencies. So I'd like to thank Brooke and Beck for the opportunity today to chat to you all and the great work that's happening with CCAT and the team around raising the profile of these opportunities. You know, of that 20% of emissions, some 60% of that relates to light vehicles and light commercial vehicles. So anything that we can do in that space is going to have quite a significant impact. Another 20% of those emissions are from the freight sector. So again, there's a lot of work to be done, and we need to kind of pull all the levers that we can to get this underway. So I'm going to touch on, you know, how we move, going to kick off by talking about freight and how we move that and the opportunities there, move on to people and moving people around, and then infrastructure as a sort of three themes for the brief catch up today. But then I want to leave plenty of time for people's others' contributions, because I know plenty of people have got ideas of what we can do out there. The important part when we think about these emissions is that it's not just greenhouse gas emissions we're talking about, but it's other polluting things as well. So these emissions are very key to health and well-being of Australians. So anything that we can do that reduces emissions overall, not only reduces our greenhouse gas emissions and the climate change impacts, but it also improves well-being for all Australians. So when we think about freight, that's kind of an invisible web that drives our economy and moves the stuff that we want to the places where we want, when and where we want it. And it is pretty invisible. No one really cares too much about freight. They don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. They just want their stuff when they want it, and they don't want to have to pay too much for it either. So there's a lot of pressure on our freight sector to do a great job, but to somehow be invisible. And our freight is also really multifaceted in Australia. We've got such a diverse range of transport needs and providers. We've got massive line haul tasks moved on massive trucks. We've got FMCG, fast moving consumer goods, moving up and down our interstate motorways. We've got minerals and primary produce moving out of regional areas down to our ports. Then we've also got port shuttles, you know, efficiently moving or inefficiently sometimes, but moving product off our ports to supply consumers with those, you know, great imported products that we continue to demand in higher and higher quantities. And then also those sort of courier vans, micro freight, and you know, some of it active transport getting delivered around our network. So lots of modes and a great variety of providers. You know, a few big players, lots of small suppliers that we need to get on board to help make this change. Some new fancy vehicles that are getting renewed regularly, but, you know, a long tail of older vehicles that are doing a lot of the heavy work. So when we think about the freight task, certainly, you know, electrification is pretty important part of the solution, perhaps more for some parts of that task than others. But the move to carbon neutral and green fuels, is, you know, future fuels is going to be an important part of the solution as well. So I've got the federal government, you know, thinking about that. I think, you know, the more that we can get on board with these range of solutions, it's going to be important. Beyond that, though, not just looking at moving to, carbon neutral arrangements of moving things around. We need to look at reducing the amount of energy that's required to actually perform the task. And this is important no matter what fuels or drive chains we're using. Even in the most efficient electric vehicle, we want to make sure that we reduce that energy consumption so that we need maximum loads on vehicles. We need to be looking at optimizing traffic flows so that the vehicles can get there efficiently. And this is where technology plays a really key role. We need things like green waves for freight. So connectivity enables us to move freight seamlessly through our cities without stopping at every set of red lights. We see examples of that over in Georgia, where they're giving a green wave to their, some of their own vehicles, some of their own council vehicles, but also snowplows. No one wants a snowplow stopping at every red light and having to start up again, pushing a load of snow. So there's a lot of learnings from what's happening internationally that we can, the technology is mature, it's been deployed. We need to look at the right policy settings and how we can get that applied here. Of course, technology, already plays a key role in optimal loading, routing and scheduling of our freight sector. But anyone that's engaged in that space can see that there's more that we can do there. With increased connectivity, the emerging role of AI, there's certainly more that we can do to make sure that as we move our freight, it's moved most efficiently. And we see also that automated vehicles is a key opportunity for the freight sector. We need to pick the right corridors and the right modes, but automated vehicles provide the potential for things like moving freight perhaps overnight, freeing up capacity during the day for light vehicles when people want to move on the network. We've got a long tail of smaller suppliers in the freight sector, and I think there's a great role for technology to now start to play more of a role in supporting those smaller players as well and helping them be more efficient and effective. So, making them part of the club that gets access to some of the smart tools that the big players have got access to. So there's a range of opportunities there as well. When we look at moving people around, transport gets people to the places they need to and want to go. It helps them be economically productive and, earn a wage, but it also gets them to do the things that they want to do and helps them live their best lives. So people choose different modes of transport based on a whole range of different factors. People want something that's convenient. They want something that's the right cost. They want something that takes the right time. Maybe they choose an active mode because the time that they're investing in travelling can be an exercise time. Maybe it's a sustainable choice. So there's a whole range of things that people are reflecting on when they make their journey choices. So one of our goals at ITS Australia is to make sure that there are options available that are seamless and interconnected, that there's an easy path to choose a more sustainable approach to transport for people. We're currently undertaking a really interesting piece of research with the Federal Government of Australia looking at behavioural change for sustainable transport. This piece of work aims to understand why people choose certain modes and what would make a more sustainable mode a more attractive choice. Because I think if we're expecting people to take a different mode of transport, we have to make it a mode of choice. So by understanding people's decisions and why they make certain decisions, we can use that to inform policy and help develop transport arrangements that are appealing and more sustainable at the same time. So we've already got a range of features that support both sustainability and convenience at the same time, and we just need to roll some of those out more and look for those new options. In Europe, for example, we know that they're using connectivity in buses such that buses will wait at the bus stop until the traffic light that's next on their journey is green. This means that the bus can pull out and travel smoothly into the traffic and on through the traffic lights. It's a more comfortable journey. Buses aren't stopping and starting, and we know passengers don't like that. It's a more fuel efficient journey, energy efficient, and it helps the buses get there on time, and it's a more comfortable journey for passengers. In Melbourne, we've got the Greenway for cyclists along Nicholson Street. So that makes it an easier journey for cyclists, more energy efficient for those cyclists that are pedalling. So when we get a group of cyclists, 4 or more travelling together, the lights will stay green for those cyclists. So it's another, a little bit of a carrot for encouraging people to make a better choice. And across our cities, we've got numerous examples of bus and tram priority. Helps get people to their journeys on time. Again, it's a more efficient journey, but it also, helps prioritise that and helps them meet the timeline that they might get if they were in a private car. Lastly, said I was going to touch on infrastructure. This is really the forgotten foundation of our transport networks. In Australia, we've got, a whole vast range of major infrastructure projects that are, under development and about to be delivered. Infrastructure is incredibly carbon intensive to deliver. As we move forward and we've got more constrained, carbon budgets, but more constrained financial climate, we're going to need to look to other approaches to efficiently leverage our network. And technology provides a great pathway for that. Now, managed motorways are a classic example of how we manage to get 25% more traffic through a particular corridor without investing in it. It's like having another lane on the corridor. We're good users of that on the east coast of Australia. They've just been rolled out in Western Australia. So we need to make sure this type of technology continues to get rolled out as and where it's needed, and that we start to consider these sorts of opportunities on arterial roads as well. At ITS Australia, we see that data is a key consideration in the infrastructure conversation as well. We need the right digital infrastructure as we look to use technology and we look to understand what's happening in the network to drive through efficiencies. So we need great data and we need real-time data to drive improved traffic flow, to help us avoid near misses, and to help manage those emissions. We've currently or recently completed a piece of work that looks at real-time data for improved safety and traffic operations in Australia. So this looks at harvesting new data streams from connected vehicles and probe data to really drive an understanding of driver behaviour, how we can drive those efficiencies and how we can improve the structure of our network. Looking at infrastructure maintenance as well, we need to be really efficient in the way we do that. We've got to move on from traditional pen and paper modes of tracking infrastructure challenges. There are great AI tools out now that industry are very well adept at using. So there's some examples there of how we can be more efficient in driving our infrastructure builds. And we're also doing some work working with some jurisdictions around standardising and making more available real-time traffic information. So we want real-time speed limits, ideally published in a harmonised national approach, real-time hazard warnings, so where there's a hazard on the road, we're looking to get that out real-time into vehicles in a consistent and reliable manner, and real-time information about railway level crossings and availability. So information we see is going to be key in helping to drive some of the efficiencies, both in safety, efficiency and sustainability. So overall, there's some physical things that we need to do to drive a more sustainable outcome for our transport networks, but there's a lot that digitisation and technology can do to really lift the sustainability of the way we transport our people and our freight. So looking forward to hearing from others on the line as to how thoughts on how that might be rolled up into the summit. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. Really appreciate that. There's clearly a wide diversity of solutions available. And what I particularly liked is that often in this National Transport Future Summit, we tend to be thinking a lot around the automated vehicles and the really high technology and really complex solutions to our major challenges. But there's some really simple solutions that can be really quite effective. And you mentioned one about just timing buses leaving their bus stops to get that green light. That doesn't sound like it's a major change, but it actually does have quite an impact on that bus journeys, that energy or fuel consumption with the repeat start and stopping. So if we can just do simple things like improving vehicle flow, particularly of buses and other heavy vehicles, that can actually be quite significant for a relatively simple solution. So
I
thanks
think
for that.
the exciting part of some of that technology too is that once you've got that technology in and you're getting that win, you've then got access to a whole other range of tools that can give you another win and another win. So there's some exciting pathways there.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. We'll now move on to Adele Lasberg. Dr. Adele Lasberg is the Chief Advocacy Officer, love that title, of the Heavy Vehicle Industry Association, where she advocates for change that will improve the regulatory and policy environment for heavy vehicles. So this includes engaging with stakeholders and developing a relationship with decision makers to ensure that they understand the HVIA's positions, particularly on the take-up of low and zero emission vehicles. With that, I would like to welcome Adele to the presentation. Now, I think, Adele, you've taken control of the presentation. You're
I've just clicked the button.
ready to go?
Find out if it works. Have we moved screen for everybody?
We have.
Great. So I thought I'd start with us, but Susan, that was a fantastic theme setting sort of lead into my presentation. I'm going to take us through who HVIA is, sort of history, challenges we face, contextual factors, and then hopefully some solutions, those levers that you mentioned that can be pulled to help solve this thorny problem. So to start with, you may have heard of the Brisbane Truck Show. So Heavy Vehicle Industry Australia are behind that, all 14 of us. We managed to pull that one off. We're also behind something called Truck Show X, which we're holding for the second time in the Hunter Valley in 2026. Sorry, small plug there. My national events manager will be very happy with me. Typically, that event is bringing stakeholders across the net zero heavy vehicle ecosystem together. And we also have a drive day element, so you can jump behind the wheel of some of these new vehicles we'll be talking about. But a little bit about us. So we represent the interest of the industry involved in the design, manufacture, importation, sale, and service of on-road heavy vehicles above 3 tons gross vehicle mass. So essentially, all manner of trucks and their trailers that you see on Australian roads. We do some manufacturing right here in Australia for trucks, and about 90+% of the trailers are made right here in Australia. So we still have a local manufacturing industry, and we want to preserve that. But we also want to push forward the new technology and the new designs that are coming through. And to that end, our membership are also creating heavy vehicle charging stations. They're also developing technology to reduce emissions on the existing fleet. And they are looking at the connectivity and automation paths as well. So we'll just do a little bit of a history lesson and look at some pictures of some cool trucks. So trucks essentially came around in the year 1896. So Phoenix, which was the first truck, was a 4-horsepower 2-stroke engine, and it had a whopping 1 litre of fuel with the engine at the rear. So we've obviously come a long way to modern trucks and quite futuristic trucks. You know, we're talking up to 800 horsepower with some 2,000 litres of fuel. So that's quite a big change that we've had in the last 100+ years. But obviously, we soon we won't be talking in horsepower and litres as much. We're going to be talking in other terms like kilowatts and range and recharge time. The language is changing. But I think the biggest thing to remember is that if we look at cars and we think about the journey from the Prius to Tesla, you know, that was a 20-year story, and we're still only at a small percentage of market penetration. Heavy vehicles are a step behind that. You know, you don't just change 120 years of industry knowledge, acceptance, and application overnight. You know, there's a big lag time, and we'll come a bit more to that in a minute. So one thing I always like to do when I think about trucks and I think about their importance to the economy and that invisible web concept, Susan, that I really like that you mentioned, is that whenever I'm looking around myself and I think, can I name something in this room that didn't somewhere along the line involve a truck? And it is quite a challenging task. And if you think about construction as well, there are trucks heavily involved in the infrastructure projects that they're often then utilising. So it's just really that essential part of the economy that does often just happen, and people do take it for granted. And I definitely acknowledge that the freight task is only going up. The stat I keep hearing is that between 2020 and 2050, the freight task is going to go up 77%, and that's just for road freight. And that, some of that will be absorbed by rail, but rail infrastructure also takes time. But you will still need trucks. And at the same time as this freight task is going up, the pressure to reduce emissions, like to make those go down, is also really real. So you've got these two challenges at the same time. And I'm sure most of you on this call have heard transport, all modes, is likely to be the highest emitting industry by 2030. That's only 4.5 years away. That's not far. And so I think this is not even a medium-term thing, it's a short-term challenge now. And one of the other stats that I often think about is that when you think about the truck fleet, and most of the truck fleet is actually made up of those last mile smaller trucks, and only 20% of the fleet is made up on those 50-metre long road trains. But those road trains have 80% of the emissions, but largely. And that is also the hardest to abate segment of the market. We've seen lots of battery electric. We've heard about great success stories, for example, with Team Global Express and IKEA. We're seeing lots of great initiatives, and low carbon liquid fuels are being explored, and hydrogen is also making significant headway with the opening of Viva's refueling centre in Geelong. But this segment of the market is a bit harder. It is harder to abate. And I guess with that in mind, one other bit of contextual factor is the age of the Australian truck. The average age is about 15 years. So you think about how frequently we change our phones. Some people change every 2 years as soon as the new iPhone's out. That allows for that rapid innovation and that rapid change. 15 years. You imagine having the same phone for 15 years. I mean, well done if you've kept your phone around for that long. But it would be such a different change when you got a new phone. So we also need to put that in context. And then the other important aspect, which Susan mentioned as well, is the composition of the industry. So we've got this great graph that the Electric Vehicle Council and Australian Trucking Association created that we point to a lot. And not everyone has got big capital or a big fleet behind them. 70% only have one truck. And so there's not that same, and the one thing I missed, they don't have big margins either. They're quite tight. So these are small and medium-sized businesses. And when you've got a small margin and small fleet, the leap to an electric or hydrogen truck or deciding to commit to buying low carbon liquid fuel, it's a huge leap. And that's not to mention the range anxiety, creating that infrastructure on your base if you have to for charging. It's not talking about training, who's going to repair these trucks, because that's a live conversation as well. There's quite a different skill set involved. And so that's another aspect of the market that at HPIA we're exploring. But there's a lot of challenges that are all sort of wrapped up in this. It's not just we'll just buy an electric truck and we're right. There's quite a few other steps that go along the way. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are definitely a lot of clever people in industry working on a range of solutions. And we at HPIA like to say we are technology agnostic, because it's not quite the Betamax and VHS battle. It's a matter of different segments of the market will have different technologies that make sense. And I think the biggest thing that we often think about is those upfront costs and those operating costs are a significant barrier, as I mentioned. And what we've seen overseas is we've seen countries in Europe bringing those incentive packages in. California, to make their great leaps and bounds, they did start with incentive packages. And so it's not all on government, but there is definitely a role for government to play around that. And we definitely believe that is part of the solution. But again, it's not just the vehicles. There are also those infrastructure issues that we talk about. That's about creating the adequate charging infrastructure. It's where does hydrogen refueling make sense? It's do we develop a low carbon liquid fuel industry here to bring down that cost? Because at the moment we're talking at least double the amount of a normal tank of fuel. So they're all challenges. They are all achievable challenges. We can get through those. The other one that I think really some of the meaty stuff that can happen right now is that a consistent approach in policy and regulation. You know, this isn't the exciting ribbon cutting stuff, but this is that really essential stuff. It's that access piece. It's making sure that people can access the roads they need to go on. It is talking about that certainty. So if you know you can buy a heavier truck and that you know it can link up across the 3 states that you delivered to, and it won't matter when it changes borders, that you'll be able to drive it there, then that's certainty that will lead to investment. And then we also just want to see people adapt faster. So a new truck, even if it is diesel, will have less emissions. If we're following Euro 6, which is the standards of new trucks that come out that we follow from Europe, they are less emitting. They are more efficient. The productivity is higher. They're better and able to be connected. There's much more data and technology behind those. So even adopting those new truck purchases in that existing fleet is already a huge win. And I guess one thing that I think is important to note is, and I was having a chat with my colleague who I think is on the call, we talked about the fact that as an industry, we are very good at creating custom solutions for problems we face. You know, you've seen all sorts of trailers, you've got tippers, you've got livestock carriers, you've got all sorts of unique solutions. So there's no reason we can't look at automation in the future, or we can't have greater connectivity to do some of these things like more efficient driving in the drive we have as we move towards more automation. So there are things we can do right now, and I think that's the thing that keeps me optimistic, but certainly happy to have more of a conversation about where we go to from here.
Thank you, Adele. Great overview there, and yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with you know, it's difficult to decarbonize heavy vehicles, and particularly those big ones, those larger vehicles. They're the big challenge, and it's almost that wicked problem about what can we do to help decarbonize the largest part of the fleet, when electrification just seems a little bit too far away. But there are options, and we are making a progress as a transport industry, and you know, you start where it makes the most sense to get those initial gains and build off that. So we don't have to throw our hands up in the air and say it's all too difficult. We just need to start where it makes most sense. I'll now introduce Ben. Ben Haddock is the transport planning lead at Arup. He's a dedicated advocate for sustainable transport, leading governments and the industry towards a net zero future. As a manager of Arup's global transport planning skills network, Ben promotes lifelong learning through applied research into new technologies. Recognised as an industry leader in future mobility, smart cities, energy and transport decarbonisation, Ben excels at leading multidisciplinary teams and collaborates with authorities, partners, planners, investors and technical specialists to achieve project benefits and outcomes. So I welcome Ben to provide the consultant's view of how we can decarbonise and make our future transport more sustainable. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Brooke, for the introduction, and spot the consultant from the introduction there with multiple words in there that perhaps weren't needed. But wonderful to be here. Thanks, Brooke, and great presentations from Adele and Susan, and really good insights. And I'll try and build on some of those conversations that we just started, rather than sort of run through exactly what I plan to do. So it's a pleasure to be here today, representing Arup to speak about sustainability in connected and automated transport, a topic that sits at the heart of our mission to shape a better world. And I believe that transport is more than just movement. It's about creating places that are safe, inclusive and resilient. And our work across Australia, globally, has shown that sustainable transport is not a single solution. It's a layered, systemic transformation. And it starts with putting sustainability not as an output, but stakeholder in every decision we make is a critical component. We have to put it centrally in every decision that we put forward. Susan gave some great stats from before. I'm probably just going to build on what you said, Susan. We know that the transport sector is one of the largest contributors to carbon emissions, but we also know that it holds immense potential for change. The Australian government says that transport is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. It's growing. It's about 21% of the entire national greenhouse gas emissions. And without further action, transport will be the largest source of emissions in Australia by 2030. But sustainability is not just about carbon. Let me begin with a vision. Picture a city where the air is clean, roads are safe, and people, whether walking, cycling, driving, or using new technology, move seamlessly and equitably. This isn't a utopian dream, it's the future we choose, and it's already been shaped today with the projects that we put forward. Here's an example in Melbourne, embracing connection, automation, and sustainability at once. It's a typical street. It's a typical suburban street. Car parking on the street, medium density on one side with residential and a few other land uses. There's a park on the other side as well that people want to get to and connect to. What are the things we start to see on that street? We're starting to see digital backbone. We're starting to see connection. We're starting to see the threads of what Susan was talking about of ITS, making things a little bit cleaner and simpler and easier to be connected on a street. But what if we take that a little bit further? What if we take that and embed and embrace multimodality in our streets? What if we put active transport on there? What if we use that connection on that street to look at counting, look at opportunities to basically optimize the signals at either end of this street to encourage more people to use multimodality? And the critical component here is we can change the parking regime to suit. Nobody's going to complain, I promise. What if we also then embrace that future connected autonomous shuttle and the autonomous connection of where we can take vehicles? We've created a digital backbone. We created that connection. We've created an opportunity to enhance connectivity from bikes, from rideshare, from future autonomous transport. It can all be embedded within a single street. But critically, what else we also embedded nature in how we plan and how we think about future transport? We have to connect nature together, biodiversity, and everything that's connected to the world into how we plan for transport, because we are directly related. Increasing the canopy on the street, increasing biodiversity, increasing the opportunity to embed more sustainable practices in transport outcomes. And that's what I'd love to get across at the conference. What if you then take that a next step further and looked at changing that street entirely, changing that street structure, creating a shared surface, creating a better environment that's connected to nature, better biodiversity, more multimodal movement, connections to automated outcomes. But also there's still parking on that street. There's still parking to connect to the residential. There's still an opportunity to be in an incremental fashion, which is something I'll click on to now. We don't need to go holistic in one utopian view to a future of an automated, connected world. That big leap is massive. And Adele, you hit the nail on the head where you said, 15-year life of current trucks in Australia. This street needs to take an incremental approach to becoming that future place for automation and multimodality and biodiverse, nature-based street. You can't just do it all at once. We've got to be incremental. And through this example, I hope I've explained that sustainability isn't just about carbon. It isn't just about emissions. It's also about equity. It's also about nature. And our recent work across the world has focused on identifying projects that deliver on all three fronts: carbon, nature, and equity. That is sustainability. Whether it's looking at designing mobility hubs for low carbon societies, rethinking suburban car dependency, prioritizing walkable human scale cities, we need to create a transport system that serves everybody. So what does the future hold? It holds a shift from ownership to service models, from concrete to circularity, from exclusion to inclusion. It holds a transport system that is not just efficient, but regenerative. And it holds a promise that sustainability in transport is not a constraint, but a catalyst for that innovation to happen. How can that happen? Some bullet points are put on screen here. How can we navigate that change? We have to have a vision for the mobility future that we want. And the upcoming conference has certainly set out a very clear vision and an outcome that we're trying to achieve. The conference is also a great opportunity to collaborate. There isn't one entity and one person and one group that's going to get there. We have to design for people, and remembering that we have to redefine what good means with nature and sustainability as key stakeholders in that definition of what good is. We have to explore alternative new finance and business models to achieve that. We have to deploy the cleaner technologies that exist. We have to reevaluate our supply chains. Where does that goods and those information and that product come from? And we have to manage that demand. Embracing digital connectivity is something that Susan highlighted and something that we really do need to get a hold of in Australia, and it's fantastic to see progress so far. And critically, that last point, which is to embed, to reduce embodied carbon, something very, very complex to do, and something we're all grappling with opportunities and processes to understand how we can do that. But we need to work together, and that's the opportunity at the conference. In closing, I invite you to imagine not just the vehicles of tomorrow, but the communities that they will serve. So let's choose a future where transport connects us, not just physically, but socially and environmentally. Thank you for that. Great to get to questions shortly. Brooke, over to you.
Thanks a lot for that, Ben. I really liked how you provided a greater depth to how we consider sustainability and really put the human at the forefront of transport. So transport's not about the movement of metal vehicles. It's about what it actually services people, and that can be more than just even getting from A to B, but creating a whole ecosystem for livability. So thanks for that perspective, Ben. Much appreciated. Just before we jump into the conversation part of it, just wanted to highlight the sustainability theme as outlined in the National Future Transport discussion paper. Within this particular theme, we focused on a couple of different areas, and as Ben indicated, there's so much more that we probably could have identified in terms of the depth of sustainability, but we focused on integrating connectivity and automation, unintended environmental consequences as a challenge of potentially increasing traffic and vehicle kilometres with the convenience of automation, and also intertwined transformation and planning. So that's building in the role of electrification and decarbonisation of the system, and the infrastructure that needs to be considered for that transition is actually very much intertwined and dependent on the connectivity and automation. So over those three themes or sub-themes, there are a number of key challenges which have been highlighted. So this is again, potential for increased vehicle travel and energy use. There's a lack of strategic direction in the integration of decarbonisation plans, currently very much focused on the electrification or low energy or zero emissions fuels, but connectivity and automation provide lots of different examples or potential solutions, as we've discussed today. And yeah, so there's the uncertainty in the interplay of electrification and automation. How do we plan for both of these transformational aspects of our transport sector to be rolled out and occur at the same time so they complement one another? And again, sort of touching on Adele's points around the heavy vehicle challenge in decarbonisation, which we may see some opportunities to provide greater fuel and energy efficiency through connectivity and automation when it's not feasible to transition to fully electric or other renewable zero emission fuels. So we might just go from here into a quick live poll. So if you can bring out your Menti apps again, this one's to ask what challenges are most important to you or your sector, and you're able to choose one or as many options as you like. Just give a moment for people who are logged into Menti to register their responses. Okay, so I've got a few responses now that equally across the potential for increased vehicle travel and energy use, the lack of strategic integration of decarbonisation plans, and the uncertainty in the interplay of electrification and automation. So thanks for those insights from the group. A few more results coming in here. So these polling results will form part of the consultation record. As we produce summaries for each of our consultation workshops, we'll be including these polling results to give a sense of where the relative priorities are. Once again, all the consultation outputs contribute to the development of the recommendations that will be presented at the National Future Transport Summit. If we can just move on to the next slide. So the consultation questions posed in the discussion paper are around, do you agree with the challenges described and how these might affect you or your industry? What challenges are missing and how would they address the vision? And what are your solutions or recommendations for addressing these challenges? So that third one's quite a big one in terms of the consultation and feeding into the development of the recommendations by the consortium members. But we can't always do everything all at once. So if you can also comment on your relative priorities, what's the main thing that needs to be done first up? What are those first steps that need to be done? Okay, we might open it up for a panel discussion. If you've got any questions, feel free to pose them in the Q&A. We don't have any questions yet. So I might just pose a question to the expert panel to get things started. If you held the public purse, what would be your number one priority to help decarbonise transport? Might start with you, Adele.
It's always a hard question because there's so many things. I think if I held the public purse, I would create a very wide-ranging incentive program that was not just targeted at vehicles, but was targeted at sustainability initiatives across the heavy vehicle sector, because, you know, every emission reduced counts. So it would be looking at not just purchase of trucks or creation of infrastructure. It would also be things like, you know, creating new technology to help, you know, increase driver efficiencies or to have greater connectivity for late at night, great routes, you know, we were talking about the red lights before. If there was some technology that someone had that wanted to optimize the system, you know, and someone wanted to get some funding for that funding pool should also fund those sorts of connectivity things. So just a wide-ranging incentive pool, you know, with also an education element in there, I think would be important.
Okay, so a carbon reduction incentive scheme of some sorts without targeting a particular technology.
But something that would be not just vehicle targeted would be, the dream.
Thank you for that. Susan?
Yeah, thanks, Brooke. I think we would argue for sort of again, there's nothing like a bit of money to grease the wheels and make things work. But looking at the national harmonisation of data in the movement of freight and light vehicles, but some incentives for states to deploy some initiatives with some federal funding on the basis that it was nationally harmonised. So looking at things like, just as simple as real-time speed limits. We know that's something that consumers are looking for. That can feed into more efficient and smoother traffic flows, and then that results in carbon savings. We would look to a national plan for connectivity. What's the strategy? And again, some incentives from the federal government for state-based programs that were aligned with that national approach. So we think there's a real opportunity for national leadership in this space. And we're not expecting the big federal government of Australia to fund everything, but providing some incentives and guidance as to what is best practice is a huge opportunity here. And we want to make sure that those, as we move across state borders, the experience for whether it's a professional driver in a truck or whether it's someone in a light vehicle heading on their holidays, that it's a seamless experience for them, and that they're not chopping and changing. We want great technology for all Australians and safe, efficient roads for all Australians. So it needs that national leadership.
Thanks, Susan. And Ben, you've got any ideas how to spend the public purse?
Yeah, I've got a few, but I'll go with two really simple points. The first one is fund active transport effectively. So in cities, in regional areas, in connections between, actually fund active travel to the World Health Organization recommended levels, which is at least 20%. So we're nowhere near that. We're about 3 or 4%. So we've got a big difference and a big gap to make, and that would have the biggest impact on decarbonisation and city structures as one. And then I'd use that last little bit of funding left to change the purse strings. I'd change the size of the purse and the context of it and the colour of it, which basically means I'd like to change how we measure and monitor and develop cases for investments in transport. That we really do have to have a complete rethink on how we're valuing our investment, whether that's through travel time savings or whether that's through a whole host of other measures. It would be good to change that. That would cost a lot of money, I know, but the value created is significantly bigger than what the investment would be to change.
Thanks for that, Ben. Got a question from David from RACWA. How can we ensure that automation results in the need for fewer vehicles as opposed to resulting in lots of vehicles travelling around empty? For example, how do you avoid the situation where personal car drops you off at work, drives home empty to park, and then comes back empty to pick you up and then drops you off? So effectively doubling the amount of driving that could otherwise be undertaken in a simple drive to work and then back.
So I've got a bit of a view that in terms of automated vehicles, the big opportunity for Australia is looking at automated vehicles for the freight sector, looking at automation for our public transport sector. We look at our urban environments and the cities in Australia, they're really quite complex, even when you compare them with some of the US cities. So some of the US cities that have got a lot of these robo-taxis that are, all fun and good, they're a little bit of a simpler layout than what we see here in Australia. And we've got a different economic climate as well. So, I think there's some great solutions that Ben had for active transport and that can help people move around our urban environments. We don't necessarily, need these robo-taxis that will, clog up our streets in that way. Maybe down the track we will definitely get to that, but I think we need to look at what the right opportunities are for Australia for automation in our transport fleet and move through it step by step.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's around the role and I guess the sort of the commercial models that support fully self-driving vehicles, which is still a way off. But are they more likely to be shared ride-hailing robo-taxi types of vehicles, or is it more likely that, or is it still likely that private owners will have their own self-driving vehicle and what that means? And they're quite different operational scenarios, and they could lead to very different things.
Yeah,
go on, Susan. You go.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say they certainly can, Brooke. And one thing that's really important, just building on what Susan said there, was yes, it's important we don't have that circularity recirculation of vehicles in cities and CBDs, because it's a good proportion of inner CBD traffic even today with drivers, and that's something to be cognizant of. But what I would say is things like automation in rail, automation in maritime, automation in aviation and other places hasn't necessarily led to the same level of dead running, as we call it, because the systems are optimized. So in the context of road-based transport, what's to say that an automated future that's shared, not necessarily fully owned, is got a great potential to be optimized, as well as the opportunity to have other things. So just a little thought bubble there to put the cat among the pigeons, to say there's an opportunity to look at that if everything was shared.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, in the sort of commercial transport world, there's a cost of running, and you don't want to be running vehicles for no productive purpose. So whether that translates as effectively for private transport is a question to be further explored. Just got a question from Dawn Dixon. It's about Ben's streetscape that is planned around multimodality in nature. The comment is a streetscape that is planned around people rather than vehicles. It's already quite a departure from the norm, but how do we avoid an even greater distance between the ideal or the reality in an automated future where segregation of vehicles from other road users might be preferred? So we've talked a little bit in this whole summit experience around potentially segregating or having dedicated automation lanes of transport for public transport or even for freight. Ben, does that sort of align with the sort of the vision that you have for the urban streetscape?
Yeah, great question, Dawn. And these are live conversations that we're having at the moment. We're in the middle of a project with the LTA in Singapore, looking at this very question: does it exist or does it not exist in terms of that delineation? Does that space, is it required? Is that market space required? And a lot of the conversation is, we can't change physics. It's still a 2, 3, 4 ton piece of metal, and you're still a squidgy piece of organic matter. And if you hit each other, it's going to hurt. And there's one thing that will come off worse. So there's something there that we there's some elements that we've got to get around. And one thing that's really important is making sure we have that opportunity to collaborate and work through these challenges together, because there isn't one sector, one industry, one place that's going to solve whether this is the right solution to progress or not. And I think the one thing that's important to note, yes, that's a beautiful vision of a street in Melbourne, and half of it's been built, not all of it. So the full segregated shared space environment isn't there, but the rest of it is. So we've got an interim period between that future utopia and now, which is probably 30, 40 years of an interim period that it has to work with. So hopefully that answers the question, Dawn. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but it is being thought about. How does that work together? Would every bicycle have a piece of connection so you could learn from it? Or does the autonomous vehicle on street need to be able to understand everything? That's the question we need to pose at the summit, I think, Brooke.
I think also picking up on Adele's presentation, where you talked about the progression of vehicle technology from A to B, from a very simple truck to something that's amazingly complex. There's definitely a progression there, but the other aspect of it is there's a real widening of the breadth of transport options, and their applications are going to be incredibly different. So part of our challenge is around picking and choosing those diverse transport options that are only going to expand significantly more with the technological revolution that's in front of us, and how we can adapt each of those different options optimally to different environments where there's where there's people and communities involved, or whether it's delivering a freight task. Very different applications will have very different vehicles to apply to that, and other technological solutions. I've got a question from Adam. Adam, do you want to turn your microphone on and go for it?
I think we have to allow.
Sorry, there we go. It just I was just unmuted. Thanks all. Adam from the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. I noticed when you kicked off the question time, you kind of said if you had the public purse. I was wondering if we flipped that around. Are you noticing the kind of private organisations showing their need for, I guess, reporting mandates, e.g. the ASRS, really incentivizing the push towards like automation and the data that they can capture, as well as shifting to alternate means of transportation?
So is that a question around the private sector? Having incentives
are you noticing
to invest?
Well,
I think with the from what we've seen with the Summit Consortium is we're getting incredibly positive response to the collaboration aspect between government and industry. So there's a lot of goodwill in this space around trying to find solutions that make sense for both the government and industry to deliver on commercial responsibilities, but also operating in a way that delivers on public value as well. So in that respect, I think there is some positive threads there. I don't represent the industry myself, so I'm probably just reflecting a little bit on from what I've been hearing. But
I'm happy to chime in from the heavy vehicle perspective. So one of the models that we've seen working quite well, particularly in the past 18 months to 2 years, is ARENA's remit they've really expanded into the heavy vehicle space, and they are doing really good engagement with private industry to say, we're here, put your projects up and we want to co-fund them with you. So you do have to have your own input. So that's that private investment, they have to do it. So Team Global Express won a significant round of funding. And so there was that sort of, you know, we'll go in and you go in, and then we'll create this depot of the future, which is what they called their project together. And you're seeing more projects get off the ground because I think there's that sort of understanding that, hey, government wants to support this, they'll come to the table, but you have to come to the table as well. And so I think that co-investment, almost, they might not like that term, but that's how it sort of looks, model, is actually really quite powerful. And I would say in my time since starting with HPIA, I've seen ARENA really ramp that up. And at the same time, I think I've seen industry sit up and notice it and go, okay, well, and I've seen some people pursue projects even without guaranteed ARENA funding. They've actually applied once they've already started pursuing private capital. And so sometimes ARENA is a later consideration, which is really interesting. But I think what that funding has done has made people sit up and take notice. I think the only problem with it, well, not problem, but just that it's only concentrated really on big projects. It's not concentrated on a small, let's say, you know, sort of almost cooperative charging station that maybe a few smaller businesses might all benefit from. These are all really big projects, but that's definitely a good signal to private industry. So I hope that's kind of getting towards what you're asking, Adam.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Got a question from Alex in the Q&A function. Talking about a lot of scenarios to reduce emissions in transport would also improve safety, increase efficiency and convenience, so real-time traffic management, cooperative cruising, and platooning, etc. So what do you see as the early use cases to address these critical priorities in the Australian context? I can probably touch on one of them very briefly. In terms of platooning, I understand that's been something that's been looked at in the long-haul freight sector for a little while, and it may not have proven its feasibility. But in the Australian Defence Force, the National Transport Research Organisation worked with Deakin University to look at platooning for moving of military vehicles for effectively military style operations, where it's about resupplying equipment, you know, potentially in a battlefield type of situation where human resourcing in terms of drivers can be scarce. So that's one particular small opportunity where platooning you know, has an opportunity. Susan, I'm sure you probably have some examples of real-time traffic management and cooperative systems.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Brooke, and thanks, Alex, for the question. Where there's a lot to be done leveraging real-time data and connectivity to look at really traffic smoothing, if you like. If we can smooth traffic out and get it moving more efficiently and reduce the congestion in our cities, we can make our cities safer, we can reduce emissions, and, you know, if we can lean into Ben's suggestion of getting people more onto active transport as well, ideally in safe, protected environments, you know, all of this, you know, heads in the right direction. So I think, you know, while we often pull out sustainability and talk about it on its own, it's something that we need to consider holistically, and depending on who you're talking to, might be the lens that you carry forward. Certainly, getting things done more efficiently is also more sustainable, reduced emissions. It's more comfortable usually. So there's a lot of wins there by just doing things better. We see that there's great opportunity to leverage real-time data and get it straight into our TMCs and to improve the way we manage data. There are opportunities then to also look at you know, perhaps some modifications to intersections. So some of the things that we're identifying is that by real-time access to what's happening on the traffic networks, can understand if it's full on the other side of the traffic light. So there's no point actually offering a red light. We can keep the other direction moving smoothly. So we've got a new layer of access to information that enables us to do things much better. And we just need to activate that and pull it into our TMCs and get that moving.
I'd just add to that, Susan, and just say don't underestimate the power of being able to analyze that real-time information in real time. So that the analytics you can have and think about the future scenarios of what was possible, what would you do if you intervened, what was this opportunity, is extremely powerful, and we're seeing the huge benefits of where we started to embrace that. We've only scratched the surface of what AI can do on top of that real-time information to allow us to predict future scenarios to make decisions. And that, in answer to your question, Alex, what are the early use cases? It's let's get Australia thinking about that. Let's get real-time information with AI scenario prediction analytics on top of that to allow us to make better decisions. Because most of our traffic management challenges are when we have an incident or a issue or a unmet demand, and that's something we can start to predict. That can help on road.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, could do some amazing stuff to help alleviate congestion in the major cities, which is also a really significant contributor to emissions that are otherwise unnecessary. Stop-start traffic is really not good for the efficiency of vehicle operations. We're getting towards the end of time, so we might just close the discussion for now. Very much appreciate the discussion and the contributions from Susan, Ben, and Adele. I just wanted to have a couple of minutes just to come back to information on preparing a submission. For those of you, do I have control of this screen?
No.
Maybe I'll take. I'll just jump forward to the preparing the submission slide. There's a bit of a recap of what we've just discussed. Also, I'm clicking through. So as part of the National Future Transport Summit, we're seeking submissions to help inform the recommendations that will go to the summit. The summit event is around discussing and debating these recommendations to provide that agreed platform to go forwards. We will be presenting the final agreed recommendations to infrastructure transport ministers for consideration by government. So in terms of preparing a written submission, it's really valuable input into this whole process, and it does have a destination at the end, which is quite significant. So we're asking for written submissions that can address the overarching issues of the summit or address one or more of the summit's specific themes like we've discussed today. Submissions can respond directly to those consultation questions or provide your own presentation or contribution to the summit for considerations. We do ask that the submissions are short and focused, so ideally limited to around 2 pages or 1,000 words, so very short and sharp. And this is to help with the analysis, given the timeliness of the summit, which is coming up in a few short weeks. Longer submissions will be included, but we do ask that it includes a concise summary of the key points. All submissions will be published on the National Future Transport Summit website. So the URL is on screen there. So this creates a public record of the consultation and and all consultation and submissions received will be recognised in the summit's proceedings report. So how you make a submission, you visit the summit website, which is ccat.org.au/summit. Download the discussion paper if you don't already have it. You guys have done a great job and you've attended today's consultation workshop. So all your input will be captured and included in the summit consultation summaries, and make a submission by clicking on the Make a Submission button. If you do have any issues and would like to discuss any aspect of making a submission or contributing to the summit further, feel free to email info@ccat.org.au. I think I've already captured all of that, so all submissions will be published and contribute to the recommendations. We do have one more consultation workshop in this series coming up, so that'll be next Thursday, same time as today, and that'll be on social legitimacy, which includes aspects of community acceptance and understanding of connected and automated vehicle technology, as well as the values that can be derived from the technology and the challenges around workforce changes that where there could be key impacts there. We also have another panel of high quality expert speakers to address the consultation, so that should be a good session to attend as well. Registrations are now open for the National Future Transport Summit. That link will be posted on the website this week, if it's not up there already. So feel free to take a browse of the website and have a look at some of the resources there, and I encourage you to register for the event because it's going to be wonderful. We're expecting around 300 attendees or delegates who will be leaders of government and industry who are coming together to debate on these recommendations across the 5 themes of the summit. So I hope that gives you a good summary of what the summit is, and I hope you've enjoyed today's consultation session. Like I flagged earlier today, there will be a record of the discussion and the outcomes of today's consultation, which will form part of the evidence base that goes towards the summit itself. Once again, I'd like to express my gratitude to our expert contributors today, Dr. Adele Lasberg from the Heavy Vehicle Industry of Australia, Susan Harris of ITS Australia, and Ben Haddock of Arab. Thank you very much for contributing, and thank you very much everyone else for attending.
Thank you.
Brooke.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.